Picture this. It's 1944. The Japanese Empire, once so powerful, is struggling. Years of war have taken their toll. American forces are getting closer and closer in the Pacific, and their factories seem to be making endless weapons. Japanese cities are being bombed, leaving behind terrible destruction. This is where a new and scary weapon appears, the kamikaze, which means divine wind. The Japanese military leaders are desperate. They're facing a giant enemy. So they decide to use a risky and controversial tactic: suicide attacks. They ask young men, some barely old enough to have a driver's license, to fly planes full of explosives straight into enemy ships. These aren't experienced soldiers, they're students, store clerks, farmers, everyday people caught in a horrible situation. But why did this happen? Well, Japan was running out of good pilots and American technology was getting better and better. Plus, there was this belief in Japan that sacrificing yourself for your emperor and country was the most honorable thing you could do. Posters showed kamikaze pilots as heroes, making their sacrifice seem like a noble act. These kamikaze pilots weren't supposed to survive. Their planes, often made from leftover parts, were basically flying bombs. They were trained to aim for the weakest parts of American ships, hoping to cause as much damage as possible and stop the American advance. So who were these young men who climbed into those planes, knowing they wouldn't come back? They were sons, brothers, friends, regular people forced into an impossible situation. Many were just teenagers, too young to really understand what they were giving up. Why did they do it? It's complicated. Love for their country and loyalty to the emperor were definitely big reasons, but there was also intense pressure from society. They were afraid of bringing shame on their families, and they felt a duty to protect their homeland. Some felt like death was unavoidable against such a strong enemy. Others found comfort in being with their fellow pilots, sharing a sense of purpose even though they knew they were going to die. It's hard to imagine what was going through their minds. They had to choose between dying for their country or living with shame and dishonor. They must have felt so much fear, doubt, and sadness for the life they were leaving behind. Imagine reading the letters and diaries of these kamikaze pilots. It's heartbreaking. These documents, often scribbled on thin paper, show us the raw emotions hidden beneath their sense of duty. In their own words, the pilots write about their love for their families, how much they miss their homes, and their deep fear of dying. They write about their hopes and dreams, all cut short by the war, and their worries about the mission ahead. One pilot, barely 20 years old, writes to his mother, "Mom, please forgive me for not being a better son. I have to do this for our country. Please take care of yourself and Dad." Another writes to his girlfriend, promising to wait for her in the afterlife. These letters are a powerful reminder of how terrible war is. They show us that even in the darkest times, love, hope, and kindness still exist. They give a voice to those who didn't survive, letting us connect with their individual stories of sacrifice and loss, stories that are often forgotten in the bigger picture of war. The kamikaze attacks did have an impact on the war, but they couldn't stop the Americans. While they did cause damage and casualties, the American military was just too big and powerful. Looking back, the kamikaze attacks were a double-edged sword. They could cause a lot of damage, but they also cost Japan many young pilots who could have contributed to their country in other ways. Losing all those young men was devastating for Japan, a country already stretched thin by the war. For the American sailors who faced these attacks, it was terrifying. Imagine seeing a plane flying straight at your ship, knowing the pilot is willing to die to sink you. It left a lasting impact on everyone who witnessed it. The legacy of the kamikaze pilots is complicated. After the war, Japan went through a period of quiet reflection. The country was devastated, and people struggled with what the kamikaze tactic really meant. Today, people remember the kamikaze pilots with mixed feelings. Some see them as heroes who died for their country, while others question whether it's right to use suicide attacks. The story of the Kamikaze is a powerful reminder of how terrible war is, and what happens when nationalism and militarism go too far. It makes us think about how important peace is, how important it is to talk to each other, and how crucial it is to find peaceful solutions to our problems.